Yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's a really nice day here in southwestern New York. I hope it's nice wherever you are sitting to participate this morning. I can't tell you how glad I am to be doing this presentation this morning, given all the things that are wearing on all of us, elections and COVID and so on. This topic is of great interest to me. It's something I believe strongly in, and the chance to share a few minutes with you all this morning is a pleasure. I thank the Cortland Committee. They've been great to work with. I love this conference. I've presented a number of times in person there on campus, and I was so happy to be able to participate with them again this year. So here's what we're going to do. We've got a lot of ground to cover. First disclaimer, these are some of my grandchildren. This is a grandparent thing. You got to show pictures of your grandchildren. But remember the two girls to the right, you're going to see them a little later on in the presentation, a little bit older. A lot's being written about this subject, but most of the real action on the topic of reconnecting kids with nature comes back to about 2005. And that's when this book, Last Child in the Woods, was released by author Richard Louv. Louv's not a scientist. Louv is actually an investigative reporter, a journalist. I really recommend the book. And before I forget, there is going to be a resource slide at the end of this presentation. And it's really important if you want to pursue this topic. I hope I've given you some good, not only books, but some websites that you might want to use. And Louv's book is on that list, of course. What Louv does is describe something he calls nature deficit disorder. It's not a medical condition. It's his way of describing the fact that the childhood is essentially moved indoors. And he finds that disturbing on many levels and of real importance in currently raising children. It really was a groundbreaking book and really began a whole movement. His organization now is called the Children and Nature Network. I have that also on the resource slide, and you want to be in touch with them as a follow-up to today. So here's the plan. I want to talk about the disconnect of children from nature. I want to talk about those implications. And then finally, I want to talk about some things, just sort of a smattering of programs, facilities, projects that give you a taste of what we can do to address that disconnect. So the first thing I'm sure most people have when they think about the disconnect of children is technology. It was probably on the tips of all of your tongues. It's the most obvious. This quote comes from Louv's book. A fourth grader in San Diego was asked by Louv as part of his research, well, where do you like to play? And the kid's answer was, I like to play indoors better because that's where all the electrical outlets are. It's funny. I laughed when I first read it. It's also incredibly sad. Kids now, and there are various research projects and surveys that have tried to estimate the number of hours that a child now spends in front of a screen. It's astounding. Most studies say that somewhere in the vicinity of 7 hours a day on average yearly. A screen. You can figure out how many days out of the year they're spending in front of a screen. More than half of that is in front of a television, and the rest is in front of some sort of computer screen, tablet, what have you. That doesn't even include what they're getting involved with in school. So clearly technology is part of the reason there's just not enough hours left if you're going to spend that much time in front of a screen to be involved with the natural world. But it's not the only reason. A factor is urbanization. We've lost a lot of green spaces. It's sort of obvious. And think about how we build our communities. We generally don't preserve trees and woodlots and so on. We cut them down. We build houses. We go back. We might plant a tree. We plant a lawn. Green space has simply been eliminated, and there's less opportunities to interact with the natural world. This is an interesting fact, and I just read this, that now, for the first time in human history, More people globally live in urbanized areas than they do in the country. Now, you may think, well, hold it, haven't they always lived more in the cities? Well, they're more concentrated in the cities, but in terms of the total population of the world, more now, finally, after all these years of humankind, live in urban. It's something of real concern as population continues to grow, is what we're doing to preserve green and natural spaces. These two are not the only two. There's two more. I think lifestyle is part of the issue in separating kids from nature. We're busy. Kids go to school, but after school they go to their extracurricular sports, or they go to piano lessons, or their parents have them enrolled in. And so we've attempted to fill all our hours. I mean, we're guilty of this as adults, but certainly what we've done for children is fill their schedule. Again, taking away time that could be spent in a natural environment. And the last one has three parts, and I think this is important, especially for any of us that are trying to program and build nature into children's lives. Fear of litigation. We are a litigious society. We seem to want to sue at the drop of a hat, and as recreation and parks professionals, we are constantly confronted when we develop a new program, and maybe we want to do a program that involves kids in an outdoor experience. Now we're also dealing with our insurance agent and the lawyers that are telling us, well, it seems a little dangerous. We're going to get sued. We can't put everyone at risk in this way. It's a real issue. It has to be confronted. Then the lower slide on the left, our friend the mosquito. In many ways, we've created an impression that nature is the enemy, that it's a dangerous place. Some of this is clearly media driven, the era of 24/7 media coverage. Now we seem to hear that every mosquito is carrying the West Nile virus, or every tick is carrying Lyme's disease, or there's an outbreak of some sort of bird flu, or there's snakes, or the branches are breaking off trees and falling and injuring people in the woods. We have built up a sort of vision that going outside the natural world is a dangerous place. And the last one, this poor guy, this actor that had to, I Googled predator. This is what I got. This poor guy posed for this picture, I assume. The issue of child abductions is something that scares a lot of parents and scares them from letting their children play in the outdoors and play out of sight, or play in the woods. The reality, and believe me, I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness, the heinous nature of child abductions, but the facts are that most child abductions are by family members and friends of the family. They're not done by strangers. The small number of child abductions that are by strangers, some 200 some a year, 75 million children in this country, roughly, 200 a year, and that number has stayed fairly stable for 20, 30 years. And most of them are resolved without harm to children, but they happen within a quarter mile of the child's home. They don't happen in wooded parks from school, on the normal travel paths of children. So again, I'm not trying to downplay this, but I'm trying to say that fear in these forms is a real issue that you will have to confront if you're trying to build programs and facilities in your community that reconnect kids with nature. You have to deal with these. These are real in people's minds, even if they're overblown. All right. This statement is, if you don't remember anything else, remember this today, that the disconnect with nature negatively impacts a child's physical, cognitive, and emotional health. Happily, the inverse is true, that positive impacts on a child's physical, cognitive, and emotional health happen with expanded experiences in the natural world. We can influence this. So let's take a look at physical, cognitive, and emotional health. some of you've got to be saying to yourself, listen, we've got lots of sports in our community. The kids are outdoors. They're playing soccer. They're playing baseball. We got tennis lessons. We got great playgrounds. All good, all true. It's excellent to get the kids outside. There's lots of emphasis on physical activity. But that is not necessarily a reconnection with the natural world. These kids happen to be playing soccer on a grass field. I know a lot of communities are going to artificial fields because they're easier to maintain, more expensive to build, but these are real factors. Interesting fact that I read that there's a medical specialty that has seen considerable growth in recent years, and it's pediatric orthopedics. Let that sink in. Now you have orthopedic surgeons making a good deal of their business is in children repairing knees, repairing ankles, repairing Achilles tendons, repairing hips. And you say, well, why is this happening? One of the thoughts is that when you play and you're physically active but on level ground, you don't work the same muscles that we were sort of evolutionary wise born with. We through history, we were living outdoors, and our bodies were built to accommodate uneven ground. The big difference between playing on a manicured field and playing in an open space that's uneven and causes your body to react in different ways. Some interesting things that are being done about sort of the physiology of playing outdoors. I mean, very different walking in a creek bed or on a mountain trail where all of a sudden you're stepping over roots and on the edges of rocks. Your body is accommodating that physical health. You've all seen this happens to be from Erie, Pennsylvania, not far from where we live. It's the typical strip mall area, every imaginable chain restaurant and chain big box store and so on. Not a lot of natural environment in sight. But think of the air quality in terms of our physical health. Where is the air quality likely to be better? Of course, it's going to be in an outdoor setting. I'd much rather breathe the air in my woods than I would driving to Erie and breathe the air on Peachtree. Curiously, just up the road from where I took this picture is a big complex of soccer fields and baseball fields dedicated to use. So air quality, an issue of physical health. This is something I've just been reading about, and so I really want to study this further. I put this picture in for us because what scientists are discovering is that these emit odors, aromatic compounds that we can't smell. Now, this really was hard for me. But then I started thinking, okay, we can't see all the spectrum of color, and we can't hear all the frequencies of sound. We knew that. Apparently, this can only detect certain smells, but it doesn't mean we're not breathing in these other compounds. They're called Phytonsides or Phytonsides. You don't have to remember that. But these compounds apparently have incredible value in terms of our physical health. They've been shown to boost our immune system. They've been shown to heighten our ability to focus our attention. Even cancer-killing cells are boosted. A whole range of physical advantage. And just talk about simple. Take a walk in the woods and breathe deeply, and you're taking these aromas in without you knowing it. I was thinking, well, how does all that get into your system? Well, think about how they're administering certain drugs now. They're administering through the nose because apparently the nasal passage is a really effective way of moving substances to the brain. Think, unfortunately, of illicit drugs being snorted. but also think about how that brain then those compounds now translate to the entirety of your body. It's really interesting science, and I'm looking forward to reading more about it. There is, again, on the resource list, I believe it's called Your Brain on Nature, and written by two doctors from Harvard, and they really are dealing with this research. Put this in to sort of follow up on the whole walk in the woods thing. You may have heard of this, Shinrinyoku. It's a Japanese term, roughly translated forest bathing. And it doesn't mean you take your clothes off and walk in the woods. It does mean you walk in the woods to improve your health. And they're so serious about this that they have multiple reserves, areas that are reserved only for people to come and walk quietly through a wooded area. Apparently, this is sort of ancient wisdom in the Far East, and now having new sort of value as science catches up to history. I want to talk just quickly about daylight and sunlight. As we move into winter, we're all thinking about those drab gray days and the sort of sadness that sometimes comes from seasonal affective disorder, they call it. I think I'm guilty of that. I get the blues a little bit more than I do when we have a beautiful sunny day like today. But again, there's some interesting things that relate to a child and a child's development physically. They have discovered that sunlight triggers certain things in a child's retinal cells. As their eye is developing, it's changing shape. And there's been a considerable growth in childhood myopia, nearsightedness. And some people say, well, they're spending too much time on screens and so on. There's multiple factors, but one factor is the fact that kids aren't spending much time outdoors, and they're not being exposed to natural light, sunlight. And sunlight apparently drives something in those retinal cells to develop a healthier eye. Again, some of this stuff, and the biologists are really looking at this from a sort of long evolutionary position. And again, interesting new research. This stuff is coming down all the time. Think about how architects, I mean, I threw in these few slides, just think about how architects have been rediscovering natural light and creating sort of happy spaces for people to work and stay in hotels and so on and so forth. Hopefully none of you are suffering from high blood pressure, but I put this in as under physical health because this would be a really interesting study. I really want to do this sometime in a presentation where we're in person. This photo sort of represents to me when my blood pressure was the lowest ever. This is a spot, a Rainbow Lake in the Adirondack Mountains, northern New York State. Some of you may well be familiar with that region, a gorgeous area, and we love to go there. We had a cabin on Rainbow Lake. There was a little dock in front of the cabin. And on a September morning, I got up early, grabbed my camera, and went out and just sat in a chair on the end of that dock. And the fog was lifting off the lake, and this loon happens to. It was pretty crazy and pretty idyllic, but studies have shown that the natural world, experiences in the natural world, naturally lower your blood pressure, and they've even shown that looking at this slide or looking at this picture for a while is capable of lowering your blood pressure a few points. Very interesting and very positive thing about spending time in the natural world, all part of physical health. Cognitive health, we got a lot of ground to cover here. A lot of it revolves around full sensory involvement. Neuroscientists believe that our brains, as children, our brains develop in a healthy way if we have full sensory involvement. Look at this picture. Put yourself where that photographer was. standing there looking at this woodland scene, this stream rushing past you, and think of all the senses that are engaged simultaneously here. I mean, visually, you have the rich colors, the shapes, the motion. It's all there. Think about the sound. You can hear it. You can hear the sound of this creek. You can hear the birds singing in those woods. So you have a full sound. Think about the tactile diversity in this area. Touch that soft moss on those rocks, then put your hand in the water, then pull your hand out of the water and touch that rock that's wet and it's cold and smooth, and then grab some of those other rocks which are rough and sharper. A full tactile arrangement. Sound, you'd probably hear the birds, hear the water sort of rushing, and I suppose if you want to taste, you can stick your hand in that water and have a taste of some clear mountain stream. Just be careful, I suppose, of where the stream started. Full sensory involvement, very important to a child's development of their brain. But then think about where children spend their time. What do you think about sensory involvement in the typical classroom? By comparison, no comparison. Again, by comparison, what are your eye? Look at how your eye takes in big landscapes. A mountain scene with snow on trees, standing at the foot of a waterfall. The incredible beauty of a spider on a web with morning dew, and then think about you can find some really crazy photos on the internet. But just think about the sensory stimulation. Look around where you are. Look around the room where you're sitting, and think about the sensory involvement that's involved in that space. Not a whole lot. I mean, I love our house, but I'm looking at a lot of artificial surfaces. I'm sitting at a computer screen. I happily have a window that I'm looking out at, but typically children, unless they're spending time outdoors, are not going to get a full development of their senses. They're going to hear, this is a towhee for those of you that are birders. How we work. This is a really crazy photo because I noticed that odd beast sort of staring at the poor people at the end of this picture. I'm not sure what that's all about. But think about this environment. Think about the sensory stimulation there. Not a whole lot. And then go back outside and come to our garden here, and you see just incredible shapes of nature and textures. It's a Calla Lily on the left, and that actually is on the right is the residual of a clematis flower after the petals have fallen off. Just beautiful stuff if you take time to look at the natural. I'm going to add a sixth sense here, sort of a sixth sense to our discussion. It's a sense of wonder. And I really like to point this out because I think we've all become pretty jaded. We're so technologically proficient, and our society is so clever in so many ways. It takes a lot to give us a wow factor. But I dare you to sit out on a porch and watch a thunderstorm and lightning come in and not be awed, not have that sense of wonder, or to grab a blanket, find a dark sky, lie on the ground and maybe with a telescope, but look at the starlit sky, look at the Milky Way, and not be absolutely overwhelmed with a sense of wonder. The natural world can do that. I'd contend that it's unlikely we're going to get that same sense of wonder sitting inside. Take a look at this quote. You'll find something. Actually, I can't read the whole thing, but the stones and will teach you that. Stones in the woods will teach you that which you can never learn from the masters. Saint Bernard actually was a real person. He was an 11th century monk. And yes, the dogs are actually named after this Saint Bernard because they used to be used as a breed to guard passerby on a woodland path that was named for St. Bernard in the Alps. So there's some information you didn't know you'd learned today. All right, take a look at this picture. And now go back 5 minutes. And this young man that appears to be leading either siblings or friends on this hike came across a little gully with this log across it. Now think about the cognitive sort of advantage that he had to apply to this situation. He had to assess risk. That's a pretty advanced cognitive skill. And he had to determine whether the log crossed. He had to assess the risk of if we fall off, how far is the fall. He had to he's building his confidence in this, because now he's got other kids depending on him to make a choice. He's showing leadership. All of this as a result of an experience just on a walk in the woods. Now, you may be saying, hey, listen, I'm experiencing lots of risk and risk assessment when I play a video game. I'm trying to determine that my little thing is not being gobbled up by some other thing. You can tell I don't play video games, but you get my drift. That's not real risk. This is real risk. I mean, he really had to figure this out before off on this log. That's important cognitive skills. Lest we think that all of this is just sort of, well, that's nice, but hey, you have to be able to produce in school. You have to be able to do well on tests and so on. Well, not to worry. The actual research is showing the kids who have more extended periods of time in the natural world do better on standardized tests. That's a really telling piece of research. A lot of it's coming out of, the Far East. The last research that I read was actually some top scientists, but they did the study in Massachusetts. And don't take my word for it. A much smarter guy, Albert Einstein, said, look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better. Not a bad thing to keep in mind. Now, we've been talking sort of about the left side of the brain, if you adhere to those theories of left side, right side brain function. But let's think for a bit about the creative side. Land really is the best art, Andy Warhol. Interesting quote from a guy that painted tomato soup cans and 16 pictures of Marilyn Monroe in monochromes. I mean, not exactly a natural painter, but Van Gogh and painters always have found inspiration in the natural world. There's Beethoven, Vivaldi, Debussy, Chopin, all wrote pieces dedicated. Beethoven apparently was a bit of a grump and sort of rude and a little difficult to get along with. But he found his inspiration and his calmness in walking in the woods. He had a linden tree that was near where he lived, and he actually was a tree hugger. He would go out and hug the tree and sit under it. A different side of him, and obviously drew inspiration from the natural world. Poets as well. I didn't want to take too much time to read your poetry this morning, but I will mention, if you don't know Ogden Nash as a poet, and you're looking for a Christmas present or a holiday gift for someone, think about the book Zoo by Ogden Nash. It's funny. It has to do obviously with animals, but just a recommendation. All right, what do you see? You're on a walk with the kids. What do you see? Yes, you probably say it looks like a snake. It's a sycamore root, and that sycamore root sparks the imagination. The natural world, again, if you observe, if you spend time in the natural, your imagination is enhanced. And I guarantee a child sees this and they see a snake. This tree also, the sycamore also has these little funny balls in the fall, the seed pods, which are great for pitching at people or floating down creeks, or again, inventing a game with a stick, sort of a baseball hybrid. Or you can take those same two grandchildren and give them a handful of pine cones, and they turned into beasts. And we caught this picture just a few weeks ago. I'm afraid our one granddaughter is missing all her teeth, but made her an even more fierce beast there. The last piece of the health puzzle that I want to touch on is emotional health. Staggering statistics, the surveys and the studies, anywhere from 1 in 14 children to 1 in 10 children are diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. An incredibly high number. The typical treatment is, but here's another huge issue, and something that's expanding, and we're expanding our understanding that experiences in the natural world can be an effective part of a treatment plan for children with ADHD. And there is, in fact, a group. It's called. Put this down. I've got to look so I don't forget what it was. It's called PARC and then RX, so like prescription, PARC RX America. And this is 800 plus pediatricians, doctors, healthcare professionals from across the country who have linked themselves together, and they write PARC prescriptions. They write a prescription for a child to say, listen, go plant a garden, you go take a hike every week or every other day, or some natural experience. And they're finding great success in helping deal with emotional and behavioral problems in children. This PARC RX group also put together a database so that they can work with a family and say, listen, our database tells us that there are these trails within 5 miles of where you live, or there's a park 10 miles in another direction. So they're getting serious about trying to make this easy and make it effective for families to deal with that. Again, a photograph from the Adirondacks. I go to nature to be soothed and healed and to have my senses put in order. John Burroughs, naturalist. But it sort of sums up that side of emotional health. Okay, so we got to get to some strategies and opportunities to address these issues. As recreation and parks professionals, we really are sort of in the driver's seat here. We often have access to those spaces that are necessary to reconnect kids with nature, and we almost every community has existing youth programs. You have networks built up. We're in position to address this, and I'm just going to in this last section just try to hit on some ideas to give you a sense. But it's by no means an exhaustive list. And in fact, in Louv's book, he updated, I think, in 2008. But the whole back of the book is 100-some projects and things in different ways for people that are concerned about this issue to be able to take action. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about here, it's just things that I've had some particular personal experience with. The first thing I want to say is find partners. The partners are out there, and I'm sure most of you know the value of partnerships in doing our work. But on this subject, you will find some interesting partner garden clubs. It's like preaching to the choir. You start to talk to them about kids with nature. Of course, conservation organizations, Audubon societies, those groups, pretty obvious. Landscape architects and landscapers and nurseries, people that are dealing with plants and those sorts of spaces, perfect advocates. Public works departments, because they might control a lot of land, watershed areas. And don't forget about, well, obviously schools and daycare centers are tremendous partners. But don't forget about us grandparents. We have time. And the older generation will have had more. This whole issue is more generational than you might think. Folks that are age, I'll be 72 on Sunday. and we grew up with more natural spaces around us. We talked about the reasons for that disconnect. We had those green spaces more available to us than children now. And grandparents have time, so they're great. They're great partners. Let's talk quickly about trails. It seems a fairly obvious way to get kids into the natural world. So here's a beautiful looking trail, nice paved bike trail. There's joggers, there's walkers, families, and so on. I'm guessing that most of the walkers and joggers have earbuds in, so they're not hearing nature. I'm guessing that on a trail, nobody's really stopping. And in order to experience nature, you really have to slow down. You have to be able to see and smell and touch and listen. And this is a great trail. It's not to say that this is not a useful space in a community. It's a great space, and great to get people out in the fresh air and exercising. But it's not necessarily reconnecting with the natural world. Nor is this. This is a really exciting looking mountain bike or BMX bike trail for kids. These guys are flying over this really creative boardwalk here in what looks to be an incredible natural area. Sort of a mountain in the background and trees and so on. They're not reconnecting with nature here. They are getting good exercise. They are outside, but they are not reconnecting with nature, so they're not stopping. They're just zooming past it. You can't zoom through nature and expect to experience it. Whereas if you take a walk on a little narrow trail, now all of a sudden you're seeing, you're smelling, you're touching, you're experiencing it firsthand, and you're going slowly. And that has a lot to do with the ability to create these intimate experiences with the natural world, the ones that last, the ones that stay with you. Our friends in New York City, with this is the High Line, of an incredibly clever use of an old railway spur on the west side, the meatpacking district in New York City. And they have created an urban park with a meandering trail, and they've planted flowers. They actually have some trees growing, lots of flowering things, lots of shapes, colors. You can observe quite a range of urban nature on this trail. I had a participant in a webinar that I did about a month ago who said that they were on this trail, and in fact they moved because there were so many people trying to get access to the trail, and sort of like, what was he to do? And I said, in a good way, you were forced to not go quickly down this path. It's about 1.5 miles long, this trail. I said, you were forced to stop, and that's a much better opportunity for you with your kids. He had his family with him, to observe the natural surroundings, not just pass through it. This sign in that this comes from an area that my wife Diane and I have been working on near our local school, to create Nomozones, areas that were being mowed for no particular reason, play fields or whatever. They were just areas, and they were being mowed. But by not mowing, you create habitat, you control runoff, pollutants are controlled, and you also conserve resources. Well, what does this have to do with trails? Well, you take a lawnmower and you mow through. This is a different site. And you create a trail through this Nomozone. Now, all of a sudden, you have an opportunity to introduce kids to a natural surrounding. I, however, would contend that they sort of goofed up on this space because they mowed a sort of straight path. And what are the kids doing? They're running down the straight path. What do you do to slow them down? You meander the path. And I would, in fact, make a little side shoot off the path and maybe mow out a 10-foot circle so the kids could be encouraged just to sort of hide in that circle by sitting down. They might observe butterflies or other insects that are there, sounds, they would stop. So again, how you design a trail has a lot to do with how effective it might be in reconnecting kids with nature. This is one that's really, again, growing in popularity and so easy to do. is create family nature clubs in your community. Remember, we talked about fear, and it's real, even if it might not be realistic. Parents, but you get a family nature club going. Now you got sort of strength in numbers. It's nice if your neighbors and their children are going. Now I say, well, yeah, I guess that'll be okay. That'll be good. And now all of a sudden you're having those positive experiences. Talking about low cost, you need a staff member to decide where you're going. You figure out a place to meet. You carpool. You go to a park, or maybe you go to a site where you can rent canoes or kayaks, and you have this experience. Before I forget, Louv in his Children and Nature Network website, and I'm pretty sure that it's listed separately, or it's a link. A startup toolkit for communities that want to start a family nature club. So again, you don't have to reinvent this wheel. You just have to access the resources and have the will to do it. I want to mention briefly this project that we got. Let's see, we've got 5 or 8 minutes before I want to take some questions. Diane and I started a project with our local school system about monarch butterflies. It's really about habitat restoration. Monarch butterflies are threatened. Their habitat's been decreased by 30 or so million acres in this country. They're an iconic species. They are sort of an ambassador for a lot of issues. Great way to introduce these sorts of things to children, because almost everybody recognizes a monarch butterfly. And we raise some for educational purposes with the school. We do classroom presentations. We plant milkweed seed with the kids. We have a butterfly garden we did at the school. And you might say, well, that sounds like a really big project, really difficult to do. Again, resource, it's called Monarch Joint Venture. It's on that resource slide. They have, again, a toolkit, including, we have our own PowerPoint. I should say Diane has her own PowerPoint because I have no clue how to do it, but she does. And we have a PowerPoint very similar about introducing the information about this fascinating creature that flies from here, from northern the United States, from New York and other northern states, southern Canada. The generation that left here in September flies 2,500 miles to one small site in Mexico. It's an incredible story, and actually a whole other presentation. Maybe we actually did it at the Cortland conference. Come to think of it, 3 or 4 years ago, Diane and I were there. Gardens, another cheap way to introduce kids to the natural world. I love this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of my favorites: "Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience." Anybody that's planted a garden understands that. I discovered this group in New York City, in Harlem, called Harlem Grown, and they have a summer camp, essentially, where the kids grow gardens. They have sites all over Harlem, and on their website, this is just a page off their website. If you look at the bottom of this, 18%, this is a survey they did with the kids that were participants. 18% of the kids increased their fruit consumption. That's good for their health. 25% increased their amount of physical activity. Okay, again, good. Natural world coming. But look at the last one. 38% of the kids indicated they can better control their emotions as a result of doing this gardening project. I found that really interesting and really, really encouraging. Garden, talking about a partnership. This is a preschool that I was responsible for as part of my job at Chautauqua Institution. And this is just in a small fenced-in backyard behind the preschool. And the local garden club came in and built a sensory garden for me. So you had things that the kids could touch, they could smell, even some things that they could taste. And it was popular, it was cheap, and a way to introduce young children, in this case, 3 and 4 year olds, to the natural world. Just a little idea for day camps or other after school programs or whatever. I call it a 30-inch hike. give the kids magnifying glasses, mark out a very small area, give them something to dig with, and see what they can find in 30 inches or 3 feet. I mean, that's just sort of arbitrary, just some small space. Another variation on this: take a board, lay it down on the ground, and see what's there. Say after a week, tip the board over, be all sorts of bugs. Playgrounds are going to have to go through this fairly quickly. We think of playgrounds in this way, and there's a great playground right outside of school. Looks really interesting. But what if we think outside the box and inside the woods? This is a playground I built. It was a German firm. They had a U.S. office in Massachusetts, but it's a netscape with this big climbing apparatus where the kids really got into the natural world, and you could see through it. It wasn't bright colors and so on. It was more natural in the setting, built right in this wooded area. We had a graphic about the birds they might observe. And lest you think that this was in some wild woodland, it's in that little strip of woods in the back. This is a former elementary school. It's now a community center that we had a fitness center and a pool and classrooms in. A tennis center is off to the right. That strip of woods is probably no more than, if it's 50 yards, it's huge. And then a heavily residential area on the other side. So you don't need wilderness to do that. This is a sunflower maze, real easy to do, great idea, fun to watch as it grows, and you just have sort of a mowed path. You plant a whole bunch of sunflower seeds, cheap, and really exciting when it gets grown up. Kids love just exploring it, and actually it'll seed itself after a year if you have a space. It'll back every year. Think about just natural elements to have a play space. You get some sticks that kids can rearrange into some sort of house. Get a hollow log, and yes, it's going to rot, and yes, you're going to have to replace it. But think again about the sensory involvement, so much more than on a playground made of metal and plastic. Or you can just get some materials together and let the kids figure out what to do. Got pine cones, got rocks, got sticks, got shells. Simple, cheap, and again, very effective in introducing kids to the natural. You can wait for a rainstorm and then send some kids out into the. There's no kid in the world that doesn't like jumping in a puddle, and it's more useful in their development than we might think. Well, this is a quote from Louv: "There's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes." Think about investing in nature. A loan closet maybe in your community where you get donations or you expend a small amount of money to have bug boxes and a fishing pole and some magnifying glasses, maybe a tent for a backyard camp out. I think all of that's possible. A word about staffing quickly. It's hard for us to think that our staff is going to be effective in nature with children if they haven't shared nature themselves. And so maybe when we interview staff, we need to think about we need to think about who our staff are and what their personal experiences have been in the natural world. It leads to a staff member who was not afraid. This is at the day camp that I oversaw. Who was not afraid to take kids in her group out into a driving summer sun shower. And as you can see, I suspect that child and that counselor remembered that day for a long time. Do not understand, they will not value. What they do not value, they will not protect. And what they do not protect, they will lose. Charles Jordan was the first African-American city councilman in Portland, Oregon, and he was their Recreation and Parks director for 15 years. A real leader in the field, and a great quote. Now I see the secret of making the best persons. It is to grow in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth. Walt Whitman. I think I have run through a lot of information, and we do have a few minutes, and do you want to come on and field questions for me, or how do you want this to work?
Yeah, it's really your preference. If people want to type it in the chat, you're welcome to. I can read it to you if you want, or if people just want to unmute themselves and ask directly.
Yeah.
So far, everybody's been saying they love the presentation. So.
Well, I'm so happy to have you with me this morning. It's really exciting to see how much is being studied about this, not just talked about in sort of a hopeful, wishful way, but really a lot of scientific research, neuroscientists and historians and sociologists. So.
Yeah, Nancy actually asked, did you make the presentation or the PowerPoint available online?
The one that I just did. Yeah, I can. If somebody helps me figure it. Oh, you know what? I can share. I did a webinar. I mentioned this. This was out of a group from California. It's a longer presentation, but I have the rights to that whole presentation, including the audio. And if someone, I will simply forward the whole thing to them. That would be that'd be great. I'd love to do it. My email is on here. Let me get to my email is at the bottom of this last slide. It's just first initial last name HHH at gmail.com. Write it down, or you'll get. Hannah, were you going to do something with this last slide?
Yeah, I can type out all the links in the chat, and then they're going to be live links, so you can just click on them via that. And also, this presentation was recorded, and in a week or so, you can join the Cortland Recreation Conference on YouTube and view this. So it'll all be uploaded then, if you would like.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize that if any of you want to be in touch with me directly, you have my email, and don't hesitate. I mean, I'm retired. I've got time to do these things. It's great. But be in touch if you have something, maybe a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, or just something that you want to share. Just email me. And I mean, it sure beats most of the emails I get. So yeah, do that. Also, anybody else out there?
Ellen did ask, can you talk about staffing some more, like how to get staff out of their comfort zone? They don't, did they feel they had
well, here's the thing, at a certain point you say, well, how, I'm not a naturalist, and I'm not, my major was in biology, or how am I going to do this? Think about it. How would you get a child that you want to learn to read? Well, you read with them, you read to them. You buy them books, you give them ample opportunity to start to learn to read, and they see you reading. So there's a certain modeling of behaviors as well as making opportunities. It's not much different with trying to get staff to embrace this kind. You have to involve them. It's going to be difficult to just talk them through it. You need to make an effort, first of all, to find the staff that has sort of a predisposition to this, but also you may have to let them experience things. You may have to, if you want them to guide other children, you're going to have to get them to love it first. It's what we do not value, we will not protect. The Charles Jordan quote. We sort of have to move out of that notion that nature is a commodity, something just to be sort of bought and sold and packaged up. Slogan on a T-shirt. It's really this life-giving, infinitely interesting, healing thing that if you really want to work, if you really want to improve your staff, you're going to have to involve them in those experiences. And maybe you do those hikes. Maybe you get a naturalist or somebody from the local Audubon to take you out on their property and do a hike and show. I find my photography to be a great way too to introduce kids to nature. Now with phones being such great cameras, taking pictures, getting down on your hands and knees, all those things are. It's got to be intimate. we can't just teach about nature. We have to provide the experiences of nature. That's the key. Something popped up there, but I didn't see it.
You want me to read it to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Lauren said, just a comment. I lived and taught kindergarten in DC for a while. The school was in a very urban neighborhood, so there was limited natural areas close by. While she was there, they put a natural play space, and the kids loved it. Just a circle of logs they could push around and roll brought them so much joy. They had a garden sandbox, a slide built in a hill, and a building area with a bunch of stakes for them to construct things. They taught them to clean up the space and put things back where they found it.
Yeah, it's perfect. And you know, you sort of have to accept, I was with someone who had a natural space, and they were complaining about the fact that things got messed up every day when the kids, I said, no, they didn't get messed up. They got used. The natural world is not neat. and it's okay if kids move things around, and that's part of the whole process. And yeah, there has to be some control of you know, making sure that things don't leave the site if you have materials around. But yeah, you've got to be willing to, and you know, I've been guilty of it too as a parent, and you're walking along somewhere and the kids start pulling leaves off trees or something. You say, oh, don't pull those leaves off the tree. Well, maybe you should let the kid pull a leaf off the tree. The tree will not mind, especially if that child, I mean, your whole conference theme about sustainability, it's pretty hard to imagine that if we don't provide these experiences for children, if we don't nurture this generation, they're not likely to be stewards of our planet. I mean, we have to help them make those connections. That's why you want to take care of something, is that you care about it.
Yeah, right on the dot. We have 3 minutes left. Does anybody want to ask any more questions? More comments?
I just wanted to say thank you very much. And I appreciate you adding in the forest air breathing, because it's something that I just became aware of. And I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, we, you know, full disclaimer, we live on 65 acres here. It's an old farm. Most of it's woodlot. And our time spent in the woods here actually, we bought the place because of a walk in the woods the first time we visited the property. The house was, I mean, it's old, it's 1850. It was cobbled together in some places. We had put it together in a little better way. We've been here 46 years. And with COVID, especially, not as we're not getting out and about much, our woods and this property, and I'm just eternally thankful we found it. So, well, this was great. I haven't thought once about the election or about COVID, and the stray cat that we just adopted did not walk across the keyboard, which he seemed to be fond of doing, and we didn't have any major technological breakdown. So I consider the day a huge success already. I hope all of you have a great day. I hope you enjoy some other sessions at the conference. As I say, it's a great conference. I will always be glad to participate anytime I can be useful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. It was great.
You're welcome.
The presentation was
Bye-bye,
very
everybody.
interesting.
Yeah, have a great day. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yep, stay safe.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.